Howdy YouTube, ezNIX here with the beginning of my video project for my updated how-to for eznixOS and how I built it and how you can use my scripts and documentation and customize it to do what you want to do. Build your own respin of Debian. That's what it's here for. That's the whole reason why I did this project, was to be able to put something out that others could either use or find useful for creating their own. Now, this first section, will be preparing for the build process. So I'll go over a number of steps. The first thing that I would do is go to my SourceForge page, which is sourceforge.net projects eznixOS. Look in the files and decide, do you want ezNIX as pulled or as roll? Now, ezNIX is based on Debian stable. Right now it's stretch. So is as pulled. As roll is based on Debian testing. Now all that's explained in my very lengthy write-up, and you can read it. I'm not going to read it right now, but that's there for anyone to read. So what we're going to do is stick with eznix or ezNIX. In this folder, there are some subfolders. There is a prep32 directory containing the build files and documentation for building a 32-bit variant, which I do not build to provide. The prep1 folder contains a tar file of the entire preparation directory that I use. Everything is included in that tar file. So what I would do is download prep1, and it's dated .tar. When you download that file, it will download to your system. I haven't downloaded it because I already have it here. So download the tar file and extract it, and you will get the prep1 directory. Now inside are all the files needed and instructions on how to use eznix or ezNIX to build your own, customize the instructions, and rebuild your own Debian respin. So the first place to look would be docs, DOC. And I have some files here. If we open up prepare how to, it's really just some basic steps to prepare to build a Debian respin with the live build tool. Now, if you're doing this from a Debian install that you have, and you have not already installed the package live build, you can do that very simply by using apt-get live build. It's already installed here. And if you install this in Stretch, you get the version that came with Stretch. Now, there is a backport version that is quite a bit newer and fixes some bugs in live build. Now, if you don't have backports enabled, Let's go up to etc apt sources. I have enabled Debian backports, stretch backports, in my sources.list file. And you can see that right here. You can pause the screen and jot down how to do this. The 2 lines you'll want to add. Once you've added those lines to sources.list, you will want to apt-get update. Make sure you have the latest repositories plus all the stretch backports enabled. What I would do is then apt-get, and you want to specify installing live build out of the backports, stretch backports section. And the way to do that is to issue the command, the apt-get command, and I'll make this bigger so we can see it all. With the T option specifying stretch backports. Now that goes after apt-get and before install. And if we hit enter, we can see live build is already at the newest version. So there is nothing to do. So we have live build installed. That's your first real step. You have the tool now necessary to respin Debian using live build. Next, if you're doing this from scratch, or you want to use a different naming convention than I use, make a directory prep1. Now we already have it here, so we don't have to do it. And inside that directory, let's take a look at what's in here. Now, backgrounds is a collection of wallpapers that I want included in my build. So I have a set of PNG files, the familiar lava lamp, and all the other backgrounds that I want in my respin. And I call that folder backgrounds. The next folder is bootloaders. And the reason I copied the entire bootloaders folders here into prep is because I want to use my own custom splash screen depending on the bootloader that's being used. So I have the same splash screen in every folder. Now if you don't care about the splash screen you're using, or you just want to use whatever the default is, you don't need all these bootloader folders in bootloaders. Now these all came once you install live build. If you go to USR, share, go down, look for live. There it is. Build, bootloaders. So I copied all of these folders into the prep1 bootloaders folder. Once there, I then replaced whatever the splash PNG was, and you can see it's pretty hideous looking. Well, it's just blank. But it gets filled in with a bunch of text that I didn't want. No, I don't want to close that. Okay, so that's why I copied all the bootloaders folders and replaced my splash image, because I want the bootloader splash to be my own image, not what comes with live build. So, and I created my splash screens in GIMP with the lava lamp background, resized it to 640 by 480 pixels. And the XPM format is really just for the old grub. It's not really used, but for completeness, I made an XPM format graphic as well. So that's my bootloaders folder. My doc folder is all my documents. eznix bits, that's an advanced topic, and we'll get to that. It's not really necessary for building your spin, nor is it really necessary for building my spin. It's an extra bit. That's its own video. The hooks directory. If you create any hooks, and let's go into what a hook is. A hook is a little script file that runs inside the build process, and it tells the build process to do specific things. So I have two hooks that run. One purges the themes I do not want and the programs I do not want in the system. So I don't want Xsane and I don't want the Murine themes included. So all it does is run apt-get y purge and gets rid of what I don't want. The hooks themes hook here removes all of the old XFCE themes that I find incredibly ugly and useless. That's all it does. So those are two hooks. You notice they're numbered. So let me show you where the hooks are pulled from. We're going to go back to USR, back to share, back to live, back to build, and hooks. Now most of the hooks live in this normal folder. These all get pulled in automatically during the live build process. You don't have to edit these are all defaults. I choose to edit only one of them. This one. Remove GNOME icon cache hook. I don't want this particular hook to run, because what this hook does is it removes the icon cache in the system. Now in XFCE, the result of that is that when you go to change the icons, none of the you get a little warning that none of the caches are built. So I don't want this to run because I want the caches there. It saves a little bit of space, but to me, here I'll show you what it does. I'll show you what I mean. If you go to settings and appearance and icons, let's make this a little bigger. Off to the right, if you remove the icon caches, you get little warning symbols all along the right-hand side telling you there's no cache for these icons. I don't like the way that looks. I'd rather take up the little bit of space that the cache takes up to not have the warnings. So how do I disable this hook? The easiest way I've found to disable that hook, one, I can just remove it. But then I've deleted it. I don't want to delete it, but I do want to remove it or stop it from working. So what I do is I edit it and just comment out the line and save the file and get out. And now that command is commented out, so it won't run. Perfect. You don't have to do that. You can leave it just the way it is. Runs just fine. Now, the two hooks that I've created, I'll go to the numbering here. I numbered them 600 and 620 because if you notice, these default hooks stop at 440 and then resume at 900. So I wanted to make sure I didn't interfere with the last hook running, but not interfere with any of the other hooks. So I numbered them so they'd fall between the second to the last and the last. So these two hooks are going to get inserted into the build and run along with the default hooks. Now, if all that's a little confusing, one thing I've included is the entire HTML version of the live build manual. Very good document. I would suggest you read through quite a bit of this. It's very helpful. This is where I got almost 90%, 99% of what I know of live build came out of this manual. Okay, I include it right in my prep folder. I don't know why, but I included the two deb files for the stretch build and the stretch backports build of live build. So you can install right from here if you want. If you've already downloaded my folder, you can just use gdebi to install whichever version you want. It should work just fine. Now, since I have an HP printer, I never like being without a backup of having the plugin I need, so I keep that around. Totally my use only. You don't have to do it or include it. Icons. I have some icons that I don't really use yet, but if I figure I might, I keep them in here. We already took a look at live build folder. Big thing is the manual and the deb files. Next, I have some software that I've downloaded that I want included in the build. The first is the Papyrus icon set. Now, I could go out, and what I've done is I've gone to the web, downloaded this one deb file, and put it in a folder in prep that will be included in the build. Scripts. I want my ezadmin script installed in the build, so I have it here. The ezadmin script, part of the functions is to optimize the sources and change over to Buster. So I have a copy of sources.list files that I use within my script. Those are in sources. We already took a quick look at the splash directory, just my splash screens. VBox64. Now, what I've done is I've downloaded the 3 deb files needed to install VirtualBox guest editions inside my respin. I pulled them out of the stretch backports repository and prefaced their names with the letters DPKG-. So you need VirtualBox guest DKMS, you need VirtualBox guest utils, and VirtualBox guest X11. These are, at the moment, the latest additions in the backports. The XFCE folder. The XFCE folder contains only the XFCE configuration files necessary to recreate the look and feel of this desktop into the live build. Now, the way I got that is running a very simple command. Copy recursively everything out, the entire XFCE4 folder from .config in my home folder to prep1 XFCE4. The reason I do this at the command line is it's a hidden folder. I don't want to unhide the folder to copy it, because then the unhide setting is enabled and that will transfer over to the build. I don't want that enabled, so I just do it at the command line. Already went over grabbing the VirtualBox guest files, placing them in the VBox64 folder. Already went over the miscellaneous folder here. The scripts, the hooks, the icons, the documents folders. If you're going to use them, go right ahead. If you don't want to use them, you don't have to. And the bootloaders folder. Already went over the bootloaders folder. So that is the entire preparation before we even start to build. So that is the end of part 1. We'll be back with part 2. Hello again, YouTube. This is part 2 of eznixOS building. So, we've already gone through the preparation, and now we're prepared to look at how to build your respin, or how I built my respin. So let's go into Docs and BLD eznix how-to. And let's get back into our home folder here. Now, I chose ezNIX as the build folder, and prep1 is where I've assembled all of my files that I want to include into the build. Now, the reason I wrote these the way I did is because I've scripted these steps. Now, if you want to change anything and you want to use my script is located right here. Okay? Begins with the shebang, some explanatory comments, and anything that's not commented is a command. So the reason I wrote, as I said, the reason I wrote this the way I did was I wanted to set a variable for the current working directory and then use that variable within the script. And I didn't want that variable to change while the script's running, because the variable, if you notice, references a path, specific path. Now, this script will work whether you're in your home directory or not. However, the prep folder does need to be in the working directory. So if you open a terminal here, this is where you're going to start the script from, because it's all the paths are relative to prep1, and what will be created, the build folder, ezNIX. And all of the folders inside prep need to be named exactly as they appear, or else the script will fail. Now, in the script, you can change the name of the prep folder. You can change the name of the build folder. But you have to change those names everywhere they appear throughout the script. And they appear over and over and over again. So if you do want to change the name of the folder, the build folder, the name of the prep folder, what I would do is find and replace, match all, type in the name as it appears, and replace it with whatever your choice is. It appears 40 times. Replace all will replace all of them. I don't want to do that for my purposes, but for your purposes, you might. One thing to consider, because it is necessary to be consistent. Now, let's go through the steps here. I'll do it in this file instead of the script file. Okay? So we assign our working directory to the current directory we're in. We then make our build folder and we cd into it. Okay? As soon as we're into it, we issue the lbconfig command and all of our options to configure the live build environment. And we'll go through each and every one of these. Binary images ISO hybrid. That determines that the resulting ISO image can be written to both a disk, a DVD, or be written to a USB flash drive. That's what a hybrid ISO image is. So we do want to specify that. If you only specify ISO, it will only work when written to optical media. I believe you can specify USB, and it will only be able to be written to a USB drive. You can choose to do so. I like the hybrid because it gives me the option. Either way will work. Why not use it, right? Okay, the mode. We are basing this on Debian. Now, I've seen references, and this live build software is available in the Ubuntu repositories, and you can change the mode to Ubuntu. I have not had any success getting it to work. Your mileage may vary. Feel free to try if you want. I've also tried setting the mode to Dev1. Doesn't work either. Maybe in the future it will. Right now it doesn't. Now there is someone out there who I believe has modded live build to work with Dev1, but I haven't tried it. That's up to you to research if you want. Okay, the architectures. I'm building for AMD 64. 64-bit, that's what I want. You can change this to, I think it's i386 if you wanted a 32-bit build. You would then change Linux flavors also to i386. Or is it i686? I've already done that in the prep32 folder on my SourceForge page. You can download that if you want to try a 32-bit build. For me, I'm really only concerned with 64-bit builds. Okay, distribution. Stretch. You can base your respin on testing. You can base your respin on SID. Whether they work or not, day to day will be different. You'll get different results, one build to the next. Stretch is stable, it works. Why mess with it? What I've done is, it's easy enough to convert a stretch system to testing or Buster or SID. Start out with stretch, install it, and then change over. I do have a rolling release. It does work, but I'm not that comfortable with it. Archive areas. Now, archive areas, main is the default. I've also added contrib and non-free, so we're pulling in contributed software and non-free software, basically the Wi-Fi firmware, and I believe the Intel microcode or AMD microcode. That's basically what you're getting. But you do want to include those. It gives you a more complete system. Unless you really don't want non-free software, then don't include it, of course. Now, updates true. I wanted to grab updates. Security true. I wanted to enable the security repositories. Cache true. I'm not really sure what that does, but I haven't changed it. apt recommends true. When you install software with apt-get, there are dependencies, and then there are recommended, and then there are suggested. There are 3 levels of software attached to each package. Now, apt recommends true will install all recommended packages when you install with apt. Debian installer live, very important. If you want to be able to install your ISO to a hard drive, VirtualBox, you need to include Debian installer live. Now, live specifies the mode the installer works in. Live will transfer the squashfs image of your build to the destination. That's what you want it to be. There are other modes, but you won't wind up with an installed system that matches your build. You'll wind up with a traditional Debian install, which might be what you want, but I think for my purpose, I know for my purpose, and probably for most people's, is if you're going to build your own respin, when you install it, you want your respin installed, not a stock Debian installed. So do specify live as the mode for the Debian installer. Now, this is also important, and you might be tempted to change this to true. Debian installer GUI. Do you want to include the Debian installer on the live spin? I choose not to. And I'll tell you why. If you do, you need to ensure that the Debian installer package is installed, which isn't hard, but the Debian installer kernel has to match exactly the live system kernel. And that may or may not be the case depending on when you build your respin. It's impossible to know without testing whether your live installer on the desktop, if you use it, is going to work. Now, by specifying false, when you boot up eznix or ezNIX, you get the option in the boot menu to either run the live system or install it. You can't do both. That's the way I want it. It works. It's worked every time. I don't have to worry about which version of the kernel the installer is running as opposed to the live desktop. It just works. Win32 loader false. This is another option. I really don't know specifically what it does, but it's carried over from the readings I've done, so I stick with it. Doesn't seem to affect anything negatively. ISO application, I gave it the name of my distribution, my respin. ISO preparer, I gave it my name and link to my SourceForge page. Same with ISO publisher. It does link to my name and SourceForge page. And the volume of the ISO is my, distribution name. Next steps are adding packages to our live build. Now I separated this into two main sections. The first is running task xfce desktop into the configuration of the build. It has to go in to the config folder inside the package list folder, and then I named the file desktop list chroot. The format of this file name has to end in the word chroot, has to include the word list just prior to chroot, and then you can name the first part of the file anything you want. The second set of software I've included in another file just called packages.list.chroot. And you can see in here there's a lot of optional stuff. gdebi, calculator, grsync, psensor, gparted, blah blah blah. There's also some things that are quite handy or even necessary to have. Now, OpenVPN, certainly not necessary, but it's nice. SSH, same thing, nice to have. GVS, I'd say it's almost necessary to have GVS. SysLinux Common, ISO Linux, I include live build in the software list. I include NVIDIA Detect, just in case someone wants to use that little tool to help them determine which NVIDIA driver to install. And that echo command echoes all of this software, this list, into the file packages.list.chroot. Inside package lists, inside config, and you'll notice the working directory prefaces, the variable prefaces every path. So they're all going into the right place. The next set of lines, step 5, pretty much copies a lot of stuff from my prep folder into the live build. Now, I choose to create a directory, eznix, inside usr share. So first thing to do is I have to make that directory in the chroot so it gets included in the build. The P switch, when used with mkdir, will make this directory complete even if any of the components are not created already. So it will create this entire path. So you do want that P switch. I then copy from prep1 everything, the entire prep1 folder, into the prep1 folder in the config, in the chroot, because I want it to be in the ISO for people to be able to access. Here, I create the directory for all the hooks, and then I copy my hooks into the chroot. Here I create the etzscale.config folder, and into that folder I copy my xfce4 folder. So that will appear in etzscale.config. So those configuration settings for xfce4 are part of the skeleton and will be included in every user's home folder. That is what retains the look of all the settings of the desktop. I then copy in, while I create the folder that will hold all the background images, which is USR share images desktop base. And then I copy in all of my backgrounds. I make the folder that will hold the icons that I've created, and then copy the icons in. I make the folder USR local bin, and then I copy my scripts. Right now it's only one, into that bin folder in USR local, so it's available to run as a command in my spin. I create a doc folder in USR share, and then copy all my docs specifically into that as well. I make the desktop folder and then create a link from my documents onto the desktop. So that way my eznix folder is on the desktop when you run the live system and when you install it to your hard drive. I then copy in all the VBox packages into the packages.chroot folder. I copy any miscellaneous packages into that packages chroot. Right now it's only the papyrus icon package. And then I copy in the entire bootloaders folder into the config, and that is what gets me my boot splash screens customized that in my build. So after all that copying of all my files, and you can see it's dependent on the name prep1. If you don't use the folder name prep1 and all the subfolders named hooks, backgrounds, icons, scripts, docs, whatever, you need to have all of those paths match what's actually in your preparation folder. This is just the easiest way that I've thought about doing this process. It was easy for me to think in this fashion. You can certainly do it your own way. I'm just showing you how I've done it. You can then issue the live build command, and that will take quite a while. On my system, which is a quad-core i5 running at 3 gig, I believe, 3 gigahertz with 8 gigs of memory, takes the better part of an hour, usually 50 minutes. I do include some documentation here on how to automate the process. Now, I don't use any of this automation that live build has built in, because before I really discovered that there was an automation process, I scripted the entire process myself. So all of those commands are contained in this script. So what I do is I copy that script into my home folder. So I have the script, I have the prep folder, and everything inside of it. And now I have a terminal in my home folder. Now this live build has to be run as root. So what I do is su I am now root. I do like to see the output, so and some of these lines are really long. So what I do is make the terminal window extra wide, and I start my build script. And now I just wait. You can see it issued all the lb config. It started copying files into the chroot, what will be the chroot. And now it's starting to go out and retrieve all the packages from Debian repos to build the system according to my specifications. We'll come back when this is done. This is totally automated. You do not interact with live build the way I've set it up. My original live build experiments and the one video up there does use an interactive live build mode. And I did that right at the beginning, and then I stopped once I discovered how to script every step. Basically, installing the software I would do by hand interactively. I now install all the software with the package.chroot lists. I would run the removal of software, the hooks, the 2 hooks, by hand interactively. I don't do that anymore. Everything is automated. And I find this way there's less of a chance for error. I can now walk away from this, come back in an hour, and it's done. I don't have to think about it. That's the beauty of scripting this and automating each step. So we'll come back when this is done. Decided I'd just pop back in here briefly. So we are right now installing all of that software we listed. Now, let's go back into the documentation here. And I do want to show you something. We echoed in the task xfce desktop. Now that pulls in the entire xfce desktop as exactly as Debian would install it if you downloaded, when you installed Debian, the xfce desktop. Every component is there. Now if you don't want something that large, you can certainly specify exactly what you want. You could specify xorg, xfce, xfce goodies, light DM. You'd have to specify the display manager. You'd have to specify quite a bit if you wanted to get a real working complete system. It requires quite a bit of research and testing. There are packages like cups that you might not think of right away. Gutenprint, Fumatic for the printer definitions. There's quite a bit in a desktop install that may not be immediately apparent when you do this. So that's one reason why I stick with the entire xfce desktop, because I don't have to be cognizant of every single component and they're working together or not. Now, if you want to build a minimal system, go for it. That's all the power to you. If you want to include a different desktop, say you wanted the Mate desktop, I believe it's task-mate-desktop. If you wanted the GNOME desktop, that would be similarly task-gnome-desktop. So it's very flexible. It's really, the flexibility is only dependent on your knowledge, comfort level, and desire. Same with the software collection. Now, Havged is a little component that increases the randomness of the random number generator. And it's only really necessary on newer builds. By newer, I mean, say, testing, Buster, and beyond. You didn't really need it in Stretch. However, it doesn't hurt to have it. And because one of the features I offer, and we'll get into this once this is up and running, or once I show you the live system, if you haven't already played with it yourself, is my little script called ezadmin to do a few tasks. And one of those tasks is to upgrade your Stretch installation to Buster. And we'll probably do a video on that as well. That'll be separate. That's too much for this one video here. You can see it's still running in the background, unpacking all the packages, and it will then start installing them all after it unpacks everything. So I just wanted to pop in and let you know that the software you put in, you can decide exactly what you want and don't want. You don't have to go with my desktop choice. You don't have to go with the complete xfce desktop. You can install whatever software you desire. However, if you're using my instructions, remember that what I copy in here, the xfce4 settings folder, if you're not using xfce4 or you don't want to change the defaults, don't copy in the config files from XFCE4 if you're not using XFCE4, of course. So the more you want to customize this, the more you're going to have to adapt the steps that I use. My steps work for me. I'm hoping they give enough of an example of how to make it work for you. As I said, that's my whole point in providing all the documentation, all the files necessary to build eznixOS. We're already setting up files. Okay, cool. So it's moving along. It's taking its time. We will come back at a later point. Here we're at another crucial step in the build process. Right now it's using mk-squash-fs to build the file system, the squash-fs file system that will be your respin, that will be your live system. Now, don't panic. This can take several minutes, and it doesn't appear to be doing anything. There's no output on the line. It's just a solid cursor while this is working away. Now, the more processors you have, the more cores you have, the quicker this will go. Since I'm doing this in VirtualBox, and this is a perfectly good way to do experiment with live build in VirtualBox. I actually recommend using VirtualBox to build and test your systems. Now, I do not have this VirtualBox set up with any shared folders. The reason I don't is because I feared that setting up a shared folder in the VirtualBox I'm building would interfere or somehow cause a problem with the build. I don't think it would, but transferring the ISO image out of your virtual machine onto your desktop, you do want to enable shared folders, or like I do, I upload my builds directly from VirtualBox right up to SourceForge. And that's how I work. It works very well for me. And then I just download them from SourceForge on the host and test them. That's my process. Might sound a little weird to some, but that's just the habit I've gotten into. You can see this mk-squash-fs is taking a while, and it will. If you never get to this point, if the live build errors out before it even gets to the squash-fs stage, you know something has gone wrong, of course. And I try not to use the machine all that much while this is happening, because I don't want to slow it down even further than it already is. So having it run in VirtualBox, I'm not worried about sharing the CPU with the host and the VM. It's going to be as slow as it is. That's just the way it is. But I was hoping we'd get beyond this, because we're almost at the end here. The squash-fs stage is very close to the end of the build process. After the squash-fs file system is built, the last few things live build does is construct the ISO out of your squashfs and the installer components that are separate from the actual live image. So I guess I will pause this again and we'll come back, because after this it's going to use XORRISO, which is programmed to generate the ISO image, and that goes by fairly quickly. Then there's a little bit of cleanup that happens, and after the cleanup's done, live build exits, hopefully without an error, and you have your ISO. Now I'll come back as soon as this is done. Okay, so we're done. That finished up just fine, and we can now exit out of this terminal here. Now our build folder was ezNIX, and there is an image, an ISO, a hybrid ISO image, and it automatically titles it live image amd64.hybrid.iso. And all of the files that were used to build that image are right here. Now, I'm curious. I never really had a need to see if there's a log. Yeah, I do not see a log for live build. Okay. So there we go. So what I usually do is I will copy this, and test it and make sure it works. Now, in order to clean up the live build environment, because we certainly don't need all of this hanging around anymore. Gotta wait for the copy to finish here. So it is 1.7 gigs. That is about what my current respin is. I haven't changed anything, added or removed, so that should be what the image is up on SourceForge to download. Now, in order to clean this folder up, we can open a terminal, get to root, and issue the command lb clean. And that will clean up the chroot. And it actually gets rid of almost everything in that folder. Now, what it didn't get rid of, I manually just delete. Because I really don't need it hanging around anymore. And just because I know it's there, there is a hidden folder called .build. And that's the end of that. Now I can go ahead and test my image. So that's the end of this video. And we'll return for the third part, looking at using eznix or eznixOS. Hope you enjoyed the build, and see you in the next video. Howdy YouTube. So, we are here, booted into eznixOS, just built. Here we are. This is the way it looks. Now, the eznix folder is on the desktop with all of the documentation handy for you to look at. If we go into the file system here, under USR, share, eznix, here is the prep folder. Now, one thing you can do, actually, let's go home. Well, the prep folders are already there because I've been using this. So let's delete them. That's the way they'd look. This is the way your home folder would look upon installation. And you have the prep1 folder handy in USR share eznixOS. So you can just copy this over to your home folder, and you have everything there, ready to use, ready to customize. Now, a couple things. If you don't know, when you install Debian, if you pick a root password, then the first user does not automatically inherit the ability to use sudo. Some people really like sudo. Some people, I can live without it because I just use su. And if I want a true root login, I use sul. And by a true root login, su with the L switch resets all of the user environment variables to root's environment variables. If you just use su, you still, some of the environment variables, like your path statement in particular, are still tied to the user you issued su from. Getting a true root login is sometimes very helpful and sometimes necessary. What I'm finding in Debian testing is su alone does not work because the path variable is not set correctly for su. So I needed to use sul to get a true root login. Once we're at a root login, the ezadmin script, and I'll show you where it lives because we put it in there during the build. If we go to USR, local, bin, there is my ezadmin script. So let's run it. So, as I was just explaining the sudo issue in Debian, the first menu item in my ezadmin script adds your user, or the user you're going to specify, to the sudo group. So let's go ahead and do that. And it asks you what name, what username you wish to add. Be exact, because the user has to exist. Now you saw it said press any key to continue. I didn't press any key. It just times out after two seconds. It's just there to let you know that it worked and it's ready to move on. If you don't do anything, it moves back to the main menu. Optimize sources. When you install Debian, and even from a respin that I've customized, the sources.list file in apt, well, in etc, in apt, forgot it was going to open by default in LibreOffice. Let's close it. Let's reopen it in Mousepad. Well, this isn't a good example because I've already changed it. Well, I'll try to explain. When you install Debian, the sources.list file for the main sections does not contain contrib and non-free. It also does not contain the backports. Okay, that's almost the way it looks. There's actually a little more slop in the default sources.list file in that it references the CD that was used, the disk that was used for the installation. Although commented out, it's still there. This sources.list file, did I close it? Okay. This sources.list file is closer to the way it will be when you install. Now, I can't save it because I'm not root. To help correct that problem, I have item B, optimize sources. If we do that, it lets you know it's optimizing it, and then it runs an update. I guess Firefox is getting updated. Cool. So let's go back to apt, etc apt. What my script does, what the ezadmin tool does, is it backs up your sources.list file, and then it writes a new one. And the new one has the contrib and non-free sections enabled again in the main section. It also commented but includes the backports. So it's easy to uncomment those and start using backports if you wish. So that's what item B does, optimize the sources. Good thing to do first thing. Now, if you install on real hardware, you no longer need the VirtualBox guest editions. So item C removes the VirtualBox guest editions. That's all it does. Since we're inside a VirtualBox, I'm not going to do that. The last option, the most interesting and dangerous of them all, is going to Buster. Now, going to Buster right now entails testing. Debian testing, depending on who you ask, is stable enough for day-to-day use or not stable enough for day-to-day use. I put it there so people could play and figure it out for themselves. Also, once you go to Buster, when Buster becomes the next stable, you will already be there. You will be on Buster. I'm not going to do it on the video here because it takes a long time. And I really didn't want to do that. Well, you know what? Maybe I will do that. Yeah. Let's go ahead and do D. So it's changing the sources list to Buster. And it is going to have to download and install all of the Buster software. This is going to take a little while to download. It'll take a little while longer to install. If it only takes 2 minutes to download, we'll pause the video here because I do want to come back when it starts to install, because we are going to be asked at least a couple questions during the upgrade to Buster. So we'll be back very, very shortly. Okay, so it's done downloading all 1.3 gigabytes of data. And here we have some choices to do. So we're just going to select OK because Latin 1, Latin 5 is the right choice for me. Now we're asked, do we want to modify smb.conf? And I'll say no. Do we want to configure the mini SSDP daemon configuration? Okay. Choose this option if the daemon should start automatically now and at boot time. No. Okay. And I think that's all of the choices we're going to have to make. Well, maybe not. There are services installed on your system which need to be restarted. Restart services during package upgrades without asking. Let's just say yes and live dangerously. And I believe now we just have to wait while it unpacks and sets up all of these packages. It might take a little while. So I will pause the video again and we will come back. Okay, we do have one more question to answer here. The grub bootloader was previously installed. Now, this might seem like a little panic to you, but don't worry about it. It's not. Just click OK. And you know what? We want grub installed on SDA. That's all we need to do. That's where it was installed to begin with. And this should finish up fairly quickly here. If you notice, the fonts have all changed on the desktop. Don't worry about that. After the reboot, they will come back. Or at least they always have in the past. We do have a little bit more set up. I didn't think there was that much left to go. Excuse me. Hopefully we'll be done. I didn't want to cut the video yet again, because after this I will cut the video because we'll be rebooting and coming up in our newly upgraded Debian Buster. Pretty cool, right? This is one reason why I didn't feel the need to continue respinning the easy roll distribution, because once I got it down where it was easy in ezadmin to upgrade to Buster, I figured there's no point in putting out a rolling release. Just put out the ezNIX and easy pulled, and both can be upgraded to Buster in place. Best of both worlds, right? If you want stable, stay with stable. If you want to wait till Buster is released and upgrade to Buster, you can do that. There's no reason you have to run testing until Buster is released. You can just hold out until Buster is released, run ezadmin, upgrade to Buster, and you're there. Pretty easy, right? Just rebuilding the kernel modules for VirtualBox and any other kernel modules. And hopefully we'll be done any moment. I know I said that before. But we really are upgrading the entire operating system. We're replacing everything that was there, pretty much, and putting in Buster. So it does have a lot of work to do. A lot more than I thought, actually. I was really hoping when we got to that grub question that we'd be almost done. I think now we actually are, because it's generating the init RAM image there. That's usually close to the end. Very good. We are ended. So let's get out of this and get out of that. And I will cut the video here, and part 4 will be coming up in Buster. Stick with me. Bye-bye. Howdy, YouTube. We are back. This is part 4, probably the last part in my new eznixOS video series. If you didn't catch part 3, in part 3 we upgraded eznixOS to Buster. Looks the same, right? Our fonts came back to the way they should be. Everything still works the way it should. Still looks the same, right? However, if we do a uname, we are now running the 4.19 series kernel. Pretty darn cool, isn't it? I think so. It works just fine, doesn't it? Let's take a little look around here. One thing I wanted to check and make sure, if we look for that little file called OS release, where is it? There it is. Pretty name, Debian Buster SID. Look at that. Wow. We are running Buster, aren't we? Cool beans. Okay. Enough of that. Let's take a look around some of the programs. Under graphics, the GIMP here is running version 2.10. Very nice, right? What's the exact version? Let's see. About 2.10.8. Okay. Very recent. Come on. If we go to Office, start up LibreOffice Writer here, see which version of Office we're now running. (6.1.5.1). Release candidate 1-2. Cool. The most up-to-date in the Debian repos. Let's see, under Internet. Well, Chrome and Firefox get updated anyway. Let's see which version of Firefox we're running. Oh, where's about? Oh, it's under help, isn't it? About. Yeah, 60.5 ESR. It's still running ESR. That's fine. That's the same version that Stretch is updated to as well. See what htop tells us here. A very respectable showing in htop. Look at that. 382. Not bad. Not bad at all. What else can we look at here? Well, there's not a whole lot more. I mean, you can look around if you want. If we go to the internet here, let's go over to SourceForge again. And the way to find me is pretty easy. Just type in ezNIX. Scroll down. There I am. So you can see upgrading to Debian Buster, testing at the moment, but eventually will be Buster stable. You can download eznix or ezNIX. EasyPulled is a little different. It's a little simplified for users. Say you want to deploy this for people who are a little skittish about computers. It has a simplified menu. Quite a few of the advanced programs are hidden. So more limited for people who may get themselves in trouble by exploring. But it does have the ezadmin script. It just doesn't advertise it. You can update EasyPulled to Buster right away. And that's really why EasyRoll is pretty much going to die off. I will concentrate on the stable versions, knowing that anyone can upgrade them to Buster anytime they want, very easily. The thing to do, if you're running eznixOS, is run ezadmin. Now I just ran it without root privileges, so it won't do anything. But su, or now we can use sudo. Let's just make sure that works here. Sudo ezadmin. Asking for the password, and sudo works. Wonderful. Just the way it should. So I hope you enjoyed this series of videos on building and using eznixOS. I hope it helps you in whatever project you're working on, or if you have even the slightest desire to play around and build your own Debian-based respin, have at it. That's why I put all this stuff online, is for people to explore and learn. And if it helps some people, that makes me happy. I will say bye-bye for now, and see you in another one.